Yes, welcome to the No State Project, and we are not live today. As I mentioned before, it is new recorded material for May 27th edition of the No State Project here on LRN.FM. And contrary to what critics like to say, that we do talk about a lot, it's kind of equal time, basically, as the success stories, as we also have the train wrecks and things where things go really bad, because we are obviously dealing with people of a psychopathic nature, definitely narcissistic, antisocial personality types. And unfortunately, like I mentioned on Wednesday's show, things did not go well in New Hampshire. So to give us an in-person, first-person account of what happened, my paisan from northern New Hampshire, of the Twin Mountain Country Store, Bill, welcome.
How you doing, Mark?
I just mentioned briefly, it's very difficult to watch, especially in your situation, because it's non-compliance. All they're accusing you of is non-compliance with the code, right? Nothing violent.
Correct.
And you're not accused of hurting anybody, monetarily or bodily.
Correct.
And there have been, from almost the beginning, we have gotten admissions from not only the lower level bureaucrats that are the boots on the ground carrying out the attacks, the abuse and the tickets and whatnot, and the threats, but we've gotten admissions of no evidence from some of the top people at these agencies.
General counsel of some of the top people at these agencies on record stating no such evidence exists. Yeah, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. I still, and I've mentioned it before, because Ray Persinger has become kind of, my go-to guy when I talk about these things, because he was such a jerk. I remember the call that you and I had with him, where he was insisting that you provided the evidence to use against you, that you getting the permit, one of the many stupid permits to run this business, which has not been accused of any violence or hurting anybody. And I pointed out by asking questions, and I basically had him admit that you getting the permit was completely irrelevant to his claim of jurisdiction. And he just was raging. And it's a great example of a few things. How effective it is to bring out contradictions and to show that somebody is full of crap. But it shows the true violent nature of these people, which unfortunately you have borne, your family has borne the brunt of how violent they are, that knowing they don't have any evidence against you, they admit it. They still continue. Not only did they continue with their attack, but a few other agencies threw their hat in the ring.
They have their sacred cows, as you always tell us. They simply believe that you're standing on a piece of dirt. Our rules apply. It's not subject to negotiation. We challenge this. We know this is not true. Does standing in a garage make you a car? Does standing in a Walmart make you an employee? You being half Sicilian, does that make you mafioso? Why doesn't canon law, Roman Catholic canon law, apply to us? I could go on and on. Does putting on an apron make you a chef? Does picking up a camera make you a photographer? Et cetera, et cetera. So how is it that standing on a piece of dirt means a written instrument from hundreds of years ago applies to us? I mean, it is so simple to debunk. These people will not hear it.
Yeah, it's a matter of I think in yours, not just Ray Persinger. Well, what gets me is that, and oh gosh, Billy, he makes me a little crazy, because he's so calm about it. He's so flippant, and I'm talking about that Rudy Ogden, and the man admits legal citations are not evidence. I mean, I posted it on the website. I have the actual document that you gave me on the website. And on the next page, he or the page before that, he turns around and says that the RSA is the evidence proving that there's jurisdiction against you.
Yeah, the book applies because the book says it applies. Yeah, right. I'm going to need a little bit more, please.
And that's, the critics will turn around and say that we are stupid because we don't understand that, laws are different, that they don't require evidence. Well, what makes them different? What magical? Well, we're not saying it's magic. Well, if it's not magic, can you please look? You have been in the Lion's Den, wow, for a while, and you're face to face with these people, dealing with them, and they actually believe that their opinions, just having a strong belief, makes it true, and it boggles it's like, are you real? Are you a true believer, or are you just doing this because it's a paycheck?
Sure.
I think Chris Leonis is a true believer.
Sure. So yeah.
He actually apologized to me which was shocking, I guess, because his deeds were being broadcast there, so to speak, and the whole room got to hear what, I don't know if you remember, he apologized when we did that dog and pony show with Greg.
I remember. I also remember Chris Leonis saying, "I don't have jurisdiction." He told us that flat out. I don't have jurisdiction.
Yeah, and he wasn't considered a qualified. Oh no, that's not. No, I take that back. Greg, the hearing officer. Greg is the hearing officer. I don't remember. St. Ives, was that his last name?
Greg Ives, Ives. Yeah.
Greg Ives. He was the hearing officer, and I'll give him this. He was patient, and he was not like Michael King and yelling and screaming. So he wasn't that type. But even though Chris Leonis admitted he had no evidence, and not any of the witnesses there produced a single fact that would prove that a written instrument from 1784 actually applied to you, Greg was able to avoid the consequences of that by holding to the false premise that jurisdiction was not an issue within the scope of the hearing.
Right. And then promptly, shortly thereafter, or within his ruling anyway, ruled that it was an issue that they were going to rule on, and that they did have jurisdiction, and they were going to pursue and do bad things to me. And it's like, they could claim they had jurisdiction, but we couldn't challenge it.
Right. And as you want to say to them, you keep saying that jurisdiction is not within the scope of the hearing. I don't think you understand what that means, because you keep insisting that Leonis is right, that they do have jurisdiction. The man actually said that they didn't, and they went against their own witness.
Correct.
So you would like to think that there's someone who's critical of the work. And I wish I can get into it, but there are other people that are really getting just as they're waking up that these pseudo skeptics are not skeptics at all. But you would think that some of the honest critics would say, if the very witness who instituted these proceedings against Bill actually admitted under oath on the cross-examination to not having any evidence of jurisdiction, you would think that they would say, all right.
Yeah.
The witness testified to that. I don't agree with it, but I'm not the one doing the investigation. Chris Leonis is the one doing the investigation. And if the guy doesn't, it's just like the cop on the stand. If the cop gets on the stand and blows it as a witness, guess what?
It should be kicked. The matter should be kicked.
And so here, and this is what we're talking about, and you'll give us the update in a second, but what Chris Leonis and Ray Persinger and Greg Ives and Maria Del Terrio, was the general counsel you mentioned. She's general counsel for the New Hampshire
Employment Security people, the people whose claim that they're putting all of us to work while they're putting all of us out of work.
She is general counsel.
Correct.
For that state agency. So these people have a long history of admitting that there's no evidence, admitting that legal citations are not evidence, and yet they continue unabated. in their. Well, unfortunately, with you, they only stepped up the attacks.
Unfortunately, that's correct.
I think the word I used on the show the other day, I think it's fitting, degenerates.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a sexual deviancy. I'm talking about just a degenerate personality that basic principles of right and wrong don't apply. And you can testify from personal firsthand experience. I mean, I have some, but not like you. I mean, I've helped you through this, but you're the one who's borne 95% of this. Of course, I've had very little compared to you, but these people, look, do they strike you as people with a firm moral compass?
Not at all. Not at all. That's very well said. They chose a side. I can get really philosophical on you here. They chose the side of darkness, supporting the state, and they have to support this institution of tyranny, I like to refer to it as. And they just got to get us all to comply. Of course, it's all done at the barrel of a gun. There's no legitimacy to any of it. There's no consent to any of it. And they reverse engineer their rulings. They know they want an outcome, a certain given outcome. We're going to find you guilty, and we're going to cook the books all the way backwards from the outcome that we want, guilt and liability, liable for and subject to, and they reverse engineer all the way back to the very beginning the outcome that they want. Instead of being full of skepticism and truth and asking for the evidence and demanding the evidence and expecting the evidence and making a ruling based purely on what's in front of them, they don't care. They're cooking the books all the way.
Right. And so give us some examples of what you're talking about regarding what happened a couple of days ago. And let me just preface it, because I've said when I did Adventures in Legal Land, because I agree with what you just said. I think it's spot on. Anyone who's gone through one of these proceedings will recognize that what you just said was right. So when you start with a conclusion, the facts, what happens leading up to the end of the trial, have to then conform to that preconceived decision.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what explains the fact that judges will make a ruling without any explanation whatsoever. Zero.
Mm-hmm.
They will sustain an objection prior to the prosecution even saying what the objection is. No opportunity is given for the defense to actually overcome the objection. That's
exactly.
big. So I just wanted to say that for everybody, because it's something we have known and we have seen and we've reported here on the show from almost the very beginning. You make a decision in advance. Bill is guilty. Everything now has to conform to that decision. So, what are some of the things that happened that fit that procedure?
Well, there's a comment I'd like to make, but also in making that comment, I will just blend it in with answering what you've just asked me. The hearing officers and the judges, instead of holding the moving party to their burden, they just completely relieve them of their burden. You present them a perfect opportunity by which you challenge them point blank for the facts and evidence they rely on to prove their codes apply, their Constitution and codes apply, just because you're physically on a piece of dirt. And instead of the judge or the hearing officer looking over to the moving party, the prosecutor, holding them to their burden of proof, all of a sudden you find yourself doing battle with the judge or the hearing officer. The prosecutor is completely relieved of any burden to have to argue, defend, claim, assert, prove, etc. And you're being ganged up on by the person that's supposed to be the neutral, fair, independent, objective mediator, the hearing officer or the judge. And the fact that it's just all a rigged game becomes so obvious. In this latest matter from 2 days ago, that's exactly what happened to me. I knew this was going to be a tough one, and it was 4 hours plus of a hearing. And it was an administrative hearing with another regulatory agency, too numerous to count here in this place called NH. And I decided that I was going to go by the numbers, and I was going to set all the traps and ask them the questions. Am I entitled to a fair and meaningful hearing, presumption of innocence, etc.? And everything was fine until I got to question number, let's see, 7, when I asked him, am I presumed innocent of jurisdiction? And the hearing officer, he initially answered, yes, you're presumed innocent of jurisdiction. But then he started backtracking. You could almost see the wheels turning in his head. He kind of was connecting some dots and almost thinking to himself, you could see him thinking, where's this guy going, I wonder? And then he starts backtracking and hemming and hawing and is, well, yeah, but, well, it depends. Well, were you here, you know? And then he goes on to say, well, all the state has to prove is whether or not you were physically here. And that's where everything just exploded from then on there, you know.
Well, let me jump in real quick.
Sure.
Whenever somebody throws out, where are you going with this? I just tend to think they have got something to hide. And when the more questions they answer, the more they're coming to a realization or being shown that they're a fraud or they're going to contradict themselves. And I think that if the judge or the hearing officer is really sitting as a fair, impartial, independent decision maker, and he's only there to judge the facts to support all the allegations, then he's not going to be concerned with where are you going as long as what you're saying is still falling in the realm of is it relevant?
Sure.
That's the judge's or hearing officer's only concern is this relevant? Well, of course, they're also, the prosecution has to be meeting their burden of proof. So, okay, so let's just say, is it relevant to the prosecution meeting their burden of proof?
Right, and it is.
Did you get that? It doesn't sound like that's what you were getting from him, that he was interested in holding the prosecution to their burden. Let's see what the facts are to support all the allegations, if any, and basically the scientific, let the data speak, whatever the data says. So, did you get that from this hearing officer?
No, because we unfortunately got into it a little bit about me trying to defend and challenge how does my presence on a piece of dirt mean the Constitution and laws of the state apply to me. And he just kept repeating, well, she doesn't have to prove that. In this case, the prosecutor is a female. She doesn't have to prove that. She just has to prove you're here. And, of course, I challenge that we're talking about not only the issue of jurisdiction, but an essential element of the allegation.
Right.
And we got into it a little bit. Things escalated from there. A few examples were discussed, and things just closed down real fast. And I never even finished the rest of my questions. For example, the next question being, has the prosecutor submitted any evidence that satisfies the element of jurisdiction? Never even got to it. Do I have the right to defend myself here today? Never even could get into it because he completely shut down. Moments later, he was literally ruling on jurisdiction, Mark. The moving party has not even opened their mouth yet, and the hearing officer is already ruling on jurisdiction and making a just flat-out declaratory statement, or just declaring, rather, that...
Okay, we got a few things going on here.
Sure.
Because one of the things you could say, maybe you did, was objection. You're saying they can argue against me without evidence? Do I get the opportunity to do that?
Never got that far, but that was ready to go out.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a huge issue a huge contradictory issue here that you just raised, and I don't want this to go past the audience. I don't want anyone to miss this. The big thing that they like to say is jurisdiction is purely an issue of law, right?
Right.
If it is purely an issue of law and has nothing to do with evidence or facts, why are they so concerned about your physical location? Isn't that a factual issue? Are you factually here? That is a fact, right?
Right.
Then what in the hell does that have to do with a pure theoretical issue of law if jurisdiction is literally only an issue of theoretical law and has nothing to do with any facts?
The truth is that they're connecting the dots really fast. They may not have heard these challenges before, but they're connecting the dots really fast. And their position that physical presence means applicability is easily debunked, as I've already shared with you
Sure.
on a few examples, and could share with you many, many other examples. There's more to it than that. Not to be silly again, but does standing in a garage make you a car? Or is there more to it than that? How does standing on a piece of dirt mean a written instrument from hundreds of years ago applies to you? Back in the days when, forgive my coarseness, it was acceptable for whitey to own blackie, and women were not the equal of men. All these stupid, strange ideas, and many of these silly notions still being held today. They're protecting their sacred cows. They're protecting their institutions of tyranny, and
Yeah.
it's difficult.
But we're showing the contradictory nature. There are people that will say that jurisdiction is only an issue of law and no facts come into it. And that is so ridiculous. Even the lowest court out there, the small claims court, jurisdiction does involve a factual finding because it has to do with not only your physical presence. It's called territorial jurisdiction, right?
Right.
But it also has to do with the facts at issue. What is the dollar amount at issue? That is a factual issue, not a legal issue. And it's the same thing when you get up into federal court, too. It has to be the value has to be over a certain amount. That's a fact. Those are so. But here, the judge saying all they have to do is show that you're here. That's a factual element to it. This idea that jurisdiction is a pure theoretical issue of law is so stupid. And here you've got this hearing officer, like most of them will actually tell you, they'll contradict themselves and say, as long as the fact is, they may not say that, but for just demonstration, as long as you are factually in New Hampshire, that's the only evidence we need to support the prosecution's claim. The only factual burden the prosecution has is to show that you're physically here. What we're saying is that is grossly insufficient because all you're doing is raising a non sequitur. You're saying if A, then B. But
right.
A and B are not meaningfully related. Your physical presence in New Hampshire physically it doesn't logically follow that a written instrument from 1784 no one bothered to sign actually applies to you and creates the obligation. So you always have to throw that in there for these people who are just pseudo critics. It's not just that they're applying it to you; they are claiming, especially in your situation, they are claiming this magical piece of paper created an obligation on you.
Right. A legal duty where I'm supposed to perform, I'm supposed to love it and enjoy it, et cetera, et cetera. Again, all these things easily debunked. And, I can go into my little rants like I like to go into, does violence create obligations? Of course not. The gun in the room always voids the signature, true or false. Does coercion equal consent? If I hold a gun to your head, does that somehow create an obligation for you to do whatever it is I may be expecting of you to do? Nobody gets these licenses voluntarily. I have to have 3 licenses to sell you a cup of coffee. I have to go through 12 regulatory hurdles to sell you a gallon of gasoline. Somebody comes into my store to buy $20 worth of gas and a cup of coffee. I have to have 15 unique, distinct regulatory burdens or licenses in order to go through that simple little process. And not a single one of them is voluntary. It's pay or get shot, pay or go to jail, do what we tell you to do. And, I probably run a dozen licenses just to own and operate this gas station convenience store. Not a single one of them is voluntary. It's a nightmare. Nobody gets a driver's license because they want to. You get a driver's license to avoid being shot by an overzealous Leo on the side of the road having a bad day, or to keep them from stealing your car. And then there are arguments about how these licenses create obligations that you voluntarily, they literally maintain this over and over again in this hearing that I had 2 days ago, that you didn't have to get this license, that you voluntarily got this license. And I tried to pound that home to death. There's no voluntary about this. And by the way, as you so eloquently teach us all the time, the license is totally irrelevant, Mark. I was easily able to demonstrate on cross and in argument, closing argument, which I have to say did have a tremendous effect on the hearing officer. But I was easily able to demonstrate that these people believe that if you have a license, they own your butt. And if you don't have a license, they own your butt. So it's very easy to debunk. Well, what if I didn't have the license? Would you leave me alone? Would I be able to set up a 6-foot table on the side of the road and start selling the 6-packs of butt or whatever else it may be that I wanted? Oh, no, 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 no. We're going to come over and, tell you what to do and how to do it. So the relevancy of a license or a piece of paper is totally a non-issue.
Right.
Anyway.
Did you get it? Did you get the opportunity on cross to have them admit that, like I was able to do with Ray Persinger on the phone?
Yes. Very limited. But because he stepped all over my cross, it was really bad. Things got ugly. I was threatened many, many times. One time the hearing officer stormed out of the hearing, had to give himself a recess. He was so angry at me. One time he threatened to end the hearing right here, not go any further. And I hadn't even, presented anything, any kind of a defense nothing closed, nothing. The prosecutor hadn't even finished putting on her case. But because I kept challenging, for determination of the evidence, asking for the facts and evidence you determined, you relied on to make your determination of applicability and the applicability of the Constitution and laws. And he just kept stepping all over me. He threatened me easily a dozen times. At one point, he told me he was ordering me. I'm ordering you to stop talking about jurisdiction. Yeah.
Wow. And how many times do we have to say the fact not appearing is presumed not to exist? If the prosecution could actually prove that this was true, then they would. And the judges and the hearing officers would not be threatening you like he did. They wouldn't be losing their minds. And some don't do that. Some actually sit back and just, oh, Mr. Prosecutor, do you have the evidence? Do you need more time? And usually they withdraw. But they wouldn't look, they are threatening us with psychological exams, and sometimes, in a handful of cases, they've actually carried it out. Yeah. Actually, somebody recently, for asking a question, spent a night in jail, and we're still trying to get that plea taken care of. But he was not only held in contempt, Bill, he was put in a psych ward. He was put in for a psychological evaluation, as if asking a question. And when someone says, look, when you say it without all the fluff, you can see where the crazy ones really are. You really think that a written instrument from 1784, nobody bothered to sign, actually creates obligations on me today? But you don't think it's magical? And yet when we question that, we're deemed mentally unstable or unhinged. Right. What? So if you have the evidence, you're able to present it. I mean, here you had, how many witnesses did they bring against you and exhibits?
8. How many? Scores and scores and scores of exhibits. I can look it up for you, but several pages of exhibits.
The point is made. But in none of that did they try to bridge the logical gap between your physical presence and a 200-some-odd-year-old written instrument.
No.
And they would be the first to admit that, because I've had them admit this. Without that magical document, what they're doing is criminal.
Oh, yeah.
I've had them tell me that. In fact, one of the Dan Evans of Quatloose, it's attributed one of his posts that he had. I've got it copied on marstevens.net. I took a screen cap. That if it wasn't for I'm paraphrasing, but if it was, pretty much everything the government does would be illegal if done by a person without the protection of the law. It would be a crime. It would absolutely, but that they have the exception for them in their own rules. It is because robbery or armed robbery or theft is the unlawful taking of property without permission.
Yeah.
But they have lawful authority, which is the whole ridiculous notion that they have a right to steal.
Yeah, it's a joke.
The thing is, this is affecting real people, and through none of this. Well, I have a note here. so none of the witnesses you were able to ask regarding the applicability of the code, even the one like Wentworth who made the actual determinations against you, right?
Correct. He's the guy that I was able to cross the most, and was not even able to finish all of my cross. Probably only 1/3 of it before things were just totally shut down in a very aggressive, forceful manner by the hearing officer as I set the traps for Wentworth in terms of asking about his decisions, whether or not they were arbitrary and jurisdiction and things like that, to look at me, et cetera, in the first place, and then got to the point where it comes time to ask for the facts and evidence he relies on, and that's where everything turns south. They just jump up and protect him, and because of the jurisdictional conversations or dialogue that had already gone on prior to between me and the hearing officer, he went into a completely different manner of aggression, demanding, claiming, asserting that I am not to ask him about that. All they have to prove is that I was physically on a piece of dirt and the Constitution and codes apply, and that's all there is to it. And that really, really had a significant effect on cramping my style, for being able to go forward with Wentworth and the other cop and the other 6 witnesses, et cetera.
Now, from what you told me, what you texted me on Skype, even though they didn't come out and say the witness is not competent to testify, some of what they did say counts as an impeachment, that they're not, or at least a denial of effective cross-examination. They're not here to testify to that, or they're not experts. Or from what you texted me, it looks like you have you certainly have, from what I remember, a denial of effective cross. I don't think there's any question there.
I don't think there's any question either. I was waiting for them to deny me the cross, and I was waiting for them to say that I could not ask about the facts and evidence Wentworth relied on to make his determination of jurisdiction and relevancy and justification to look at me in the first place. And as soon as they stepped all over that and denied that, I just, made a challenge. Well, how come it's okay that the prosecutor, Rosemary Wyant, how she can allow the cop Wentworth to make legal determinations for her and ask him about his legal determinations, but I can't ask about the legal determinations. What I'm asking him for is not to make issues, they tried to make reference to this legal opinions and things like that. But of course, we know that these people, these cops, they make legal determinations all day long, every day. That's their job, is to apply their belief and understanding of the law to the facts. And I just kept hammering away. All I'm looking for are the facts. That's it. I'm just looking for the facts he relied on to make his legal determination. They knew where I was going, and they wouldn't let it. And I'm talking specifically, although the Rosemary Wyant did object as well, she didn't actually say the words, witness is not competent to qualify. She just challenged, testify, thank you. She just challenged relevancy and looked to the hearing officer to bail her out, and which the hearing officer certainly did over and over and over again.
Yeah. There's no logic. Look, the only logical explanation for why they do what they're doing is to make it look good. Because to say that the police officer is not making legal determinations and it's not relevant or proper for you on cross-examination to challenge those legal determinations is just, they're just lying. He's on the street. That is what he's doing. For heaven's sakes, you have certified complaints and whatnot. He's doing it on the penalty of perjury, which may be another reason why they're not. It's not like they're going to be prosecuted for it, but maybe someone on a jury would look at that and say, whoa. I mean, it happened here recently in Chandler. I've mentioned on the show, Rebecca went in, and on 2 of her very serious misdemeanor charges, she got an acquittal, a full acquittal from a jury. And because her cross-examination was brutal. I mean, she did really good. I mean, she had the prosecutor and the judge declare the witness actually say incompetent or not qualified to give legal determinations, and yet the whole determination of probable cause was made by the witness. So the idea that, he's only there to testify to the facts. Okay, we want the facts that his legal determination was based on. He's not making only the judge to. No, you can't have it that way. No, we're adults. And the judge makes judicial determinations and legal rulings. But that doesn't mean that the police officer is not making legal determinations on his own.
Right.
This thing, look, you don't have to be a judge to make legal determinations. You have to be a judge to make judicial determinations, and that's not the same thing necessarily. The judge is making, let's say, for example, the judge makes a determination, a legal determination of probable cause. Then you go to court, you have a hearing to determine whether that was arbitrary or not. Is it a legitimate determination of probable cause? And then the judge, based on the totality of the evidence, based on the challenge in a cross-examination, will determine judicially if there was probable cause. But all I have to say is fungool these people that say that the cop is only there to testify to the facts and not give legal determinations. Yes, he is in a proper, effective cross-examination. I mean, can you imagine that someone like in the OJ, where they go to get a warrant for his arrest, that the cop goes to swear out a warrant, I believe that based on this blood evidence, that there's probable cause to arrest him for questioning, and they turn around, they put him on the stand later, and they can't ask him any questions regarding why he had him arrested?
Ridiculous.
The thing is that you're not. I want to speak directly to critics here and to people who are honest skeptics. They're not fooling anybody with working brain cells and people who are looking at it critically, and that is what is lacking. So it's just like recently with this wave of pushback against pseudo skeptics. It's well placed because they've done it to me. This Skeptic Society came out and I did a short video about it. They're not actually skeptics, but here these people in court, they're not really much different. They're claiming to be fair, impartial, independent decision makers, but you have unfortunately more firsthand experience from this. That's not the way it works in practice. So after all that, did they ask you if you were going to, in the prosecution rest? Did they give you an opportunity to put on a case?
They did, but, our approach is primarily to attack the foundation of their case. There's that rule of logic taught to us by Gary: never argue merit while accepting a flawed premise. The whole foundation of their situation, their belief, the prosecution's belief is that is flawed, that our rules apply and we don't need to have any evidence to prove it. And our whole approach is, can you violate a rule that does not apply to you? How do you prove the code was violated without first proving it applies? And so that's basically our approach. And so my defense is really not one where I call witnesses or maybe argue the merits. I do not argue any merits that they come up with. I just kind of challenge their premise, challenge their essential elements, challenge the foundation, cross-examine the witnesses, make a close, and hope and pray they don't hurt me too badly.
All right, well, let's talk about the close, because you mentioned before that you thought it went pretty well and may have had at least some impact on the hearing officer.
Yeah, well, the hearing officer was hostile to the extreme, saying things like, "I'm ordering you not to talk about jurisdiction or to challenge jurisdiction." And I barked right back at him. "Did you say ordering? You're ordering me? Where the heck do you get the authority to say that you're ordering me?" And he says, those two liquor investigators right there, those two cops right there, I will have them arrest you. And I barked right back at him. "Oh, so your jurisdiction over me, the authority over me is a gun," Yeah. And he didn't respond to that. But
wow, what's he going to do? He's going to say, duh.
Yeah, exactly. So I just said that last part because just as further a manifestation of the hostility that he had towards me, as he finally realized, I guess, our theory of defense, quote unquote, and how we were going to challenge the very foundation. We were not going to give them a sacred cow, as you always talk about. I was going to challenge the very notion that a written instrument from hundreds of years ago applies to us and creates obligations on us that we allegedly are supposed to follow, all the while forgetting that they're forcing us through threats of violence to do these stupid, silly little things that they're having us do all the time. And when we got to the close, that went really well. I do have some passion and some energy and some anger and indignation and a little bit of knowledge to be able to put together a few thoughts rather eloquently. I know that when I made my reference to challenging the idea that a written instrument applies to you just simply because you're standing on a dirt, I pounded the hell out of that using several of the examples I've already used. For example, here in NH, we've got this thing called the Roman Catholic Diocese of Manchester, located in the city of Manchester at 153 Ash Street. And these are people, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Manchester, that claims, territorial possession, so to speak, over NH. And they have a law. They call their law Roman Catholic laws canon law. And, I challenged everybody. Why doesn't canon law apply to any of you? You and you and you. And of course, it's because there's no evidence canon law applies to any of us. And I pounded all these things home. If I just probably 8 or 9 different examples. If I go home this afternoon and there's a woman in my living room of my house when I go home, can I just presume that she's my wife and take her into the bedroom? Or is there more to it than that? And I would always close with is there more to it than that? Because they just want to say, you're standing on a piece of dirt. Our rules apply and that's it. And they never get to the part where, is there more to it than that? They never get to that part. They just, they want to create this, it's a logical fallacy. It eludes me right now. It's a sequential thing, but not a causal thing. They just, as you've already said earlier in this conversation, they make some connection between A and B, but there is no connection between A and B. The connection between A and B is purely sequential and not causal. For example, the fact that you may be standing in a garage doesn't make you a car. It's just a pure happenstance. You're standing in a garage. B, does that make you a car? No. It's just it just happens to be it. There's not actually any connection. There's more to it than that, but they never make that more to it than that. I also pounded home the idea about the licensure. Does licensure somehow create an obligation, whether it's a driver's license, a liquor license, sales tax, whatever the case it may be, license for braiding hair, whitening teeth, being a plumber, an electrician, or anything else? There is no obligation once you get that license to obey any of their rules. And the test of all that, of course, is if you didn't have the license, would they leave you alone? Of course not. Yeah. Of course not. They believe they own you regardless of whether or not you have a license or not.
Because of your physical location. And that's the be-all, end-all in their heads of jurisdiction.
Correct. The licensure is all about control. It's all about money. Any kind of cursory analysis of any of these things. I'll give you an example of what I mean. I have to have 3 licenses to sell you a cup of coffee. I've got to be licensed up, papered up with the Secretary of State. I've got to be licensed up with the DRA for rooms and meals taxes, also known as sales taxes. And I got to be licensed up with the state health people, I guess, to make sure that there's no cockroaches running around in the coffee bar or something. However, the hundreds of dollars, let's take that last license, for example, the license with the state health people. They never come out here. They never inspect me ever. So they just collect hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single year, but it's not necessarily like they're trying to protect or prevent cockroaches from running around in my coffee bar and somehow maybe, finding the cockroaches finding their way into a coffee pot or something. There's no inspections made. They're just pure control things, implements of control, and tax grabs, money grabs. So anyway.
Yeah, there's and then so you've got the other extreme where they do inspections, it's more or less just greasing a palm. Yeah.
They have all kinds of inspections that they do. Some of them they actually do some inspections, but a lot of them they don't do. But overall, generally, they certainly are implements of control, implements of tools that they can bludgeon you to death with, and just control every single one of us. And they're major tools of grabbing money and generating billions and billions and billions of dollars in revenue to go into their general fund and keep these monstrous bureaucracies going to make all kinds of Democratic voters, shall we say, who all believe in the institution of the state and will always vote for their own economic interest and keep this institution of tyranny going and this ridiculous system we're living under.
Yeah, and you did make the analogy that if I'm within a diocese, does that make me a member of the Catholic Church?
Yeah.
And to me, that's so clear. I mean, yeah, I'm a little biased because I think I'm the one who originated that just out of desperation 15-something years ago. But the only thing that people can come back with, you do know that government is different than the Catholic Church. I'm like, well, yeah, but they're just people. I go through the actual mechanics and compare the mechanics. I'm not just making a broad generalization. I'm going through the actual mechanics. They just draw on a map. This is the diocese or this is the parish. Okay, this is going to be the city, the corporate limits.
Well, the critics that you just alluded to may say something along the lines of, what are you, stupid, Mark or Bill? Government is different somehow. Well, yeah, okay, maybe, but that's not what government themselves say. They simply say, you're standing on a piece of dirt, our laws apply. They don't also say, we're different for the following reasons, this, that, and the other. They don't make that representation. Their representation, I have now gone through so many hearings, so many matters, 6 hearings with the NHES, 20 hours of testimony and recordings, numerous other hearings with the DRA, the NHLC, et cetera, et cetera. These people do not make any representations other than your physical presence means our Constitution and codes apply to you. A written instrument from hundreds of years ago that, by the way, just for giggles, in part 1 of the NHC here on this piece of dirt called NH, refers to the people, for example, myself, as a subject. No less than 7 times in part 1 of the NHC, it refers to us as subjects, as in subjects of the king, not as in subjects of something being discussed, the conversation or the subject matter of something being discussed. Refers to us literally as subjects, as subservient workers or slaves of the master kind of a thing,
Yeah, well, there's a reason for the language. Especially there's a reason why they corrupt language because people buy into it, and people, when they hear lawyers talk, they think there's an air of legitimacy, a law and seal. I'll keep it. It was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Mark, the law applies because it's the law.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
I remember it well.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That is some serious.
We have to break this narrative, we have to break this stupid, ridiculous, programming. I don't think we're ever going to do it. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. What did Martin Luther King and Andrew Young and James Baldwin and Malcolm X think? They had to put up with 100 years of Jim Crow, the institution of slavery. It has never stopped. The institution of slavery, it's still alive today, right now. Only I refer to it as the institution of tyranny. Every single level of the whole system, just like there was 100 years of Jim Crow, actually probably more than that, but 100 years of Jim Crow from the 1860s to the 1960s, from the end of the War of Northern Aggression to the days of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and all of those sadness, with MLK's assassination, et cetera. They were fighting institutional slavery at every single level, from clerks to the cops, to the laws, to the judges, to the hearing officers. Every single level of the entire system was clamping them down and not allowing challenge. And that's what we're going through today. When you fight the fights that we fight, when you challenge their sacred cows, something as simple as, how does a written instrument, a damn piece of paper from hundreds of years ago, bind me to something and create obligations upon me simply because of my physical presence? And you cannot get past square one. And the moment you raise these challenges, here comes the judges and the hearing officers to protect the prosecutors. This is institutional tyranny, and somehow, some way, it's going to be tough to break it, but we're going to have to break it somehow, some way, just the way Andrew Young and MLK and Malcolm X and James Baldwin, et cetera, and all of those somehow were able to break it in the 1960s.
Yeah, well, it's not just a matter of that it applies to you and creates obligations. It also relieves them of any moral responsibility. It magically transforms their immoral actions into moral actions. And it magically relieves them of a burden of proof. And I don't want to, this thing, I've heard this, you have heard it, we've heard this so many times. I want to pull my hair out. It's not something they're hiding, Bill. They openly and notoriously, to borrow the phrase, claim they don't have to prove that their claim is true. They actually say that. So not only is it magical, have those other magical qualities that it can bind people in perpetuity, everybody on every square inch of the earth. I'm talking about the one from 1787 as opposed to the one that they're hitting you with. But every single person on every square inch of the earth is somehow subject to that piece of paper. But they think that basic principles of logic no longer apply. Principles of morality don't apply, and principles of logic don't apply. They don't need evidence to support their claim, but you need evidence to disprove it. My Sicilian ancestors said it best. Abba fangool. But if they didn't have a prison system, you could just say that, and that would be enough. But it's not, because they're so violent.
They certainly are. The heart wants to break, the soul wants to bleed when you think. You reflect about probably the trillions of dollars of lost time, wages, property stolen, people's lives destroyed, people murdered, incarcerated, imprisoned. You know, think of Carl Draga, Thomas James Ball, Eddie Lane Brown, et cetera, Irwin Schiff, Dick Cannon, Bob Schultz. It just goes on and on. Robert Clarkson. The myriad numbers of people who have tried to fight the system and are completely and utterly destroyed. Ernie talks about the castle dwellers and the village dwellers. And these castle dwellers are definitely trying to protect their institution, and they do give themselves a free pass. There is this double standard. We, of course, know double standards are not fair. That's a due process violation. They don't care about that. I have come up across these double standards constantly for 5.5 years for 5.5 years now. And they're all due process violations because they're not fair. It's, of course, a due process violation, as you very well know, as you teach us over and over again. It's nothing more than an arbitrary denial of life, liberty, and property by government. And but they don't presume innocence. They don't hold the prosecutor to their burden. They definitely have double standards. On and on and on.
No, I had not heard Ernie say that before. I think I like the way Malcolm X put it, that you've got the field Negro and you've got the house Negro.
Exactly. Meaning, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, finish. You can finish.
We're all slaves. We're all slaves, but we all slaves. When you analyze everything, each and every one of us is a slave. There's the house Negro and the field Negro. We're all slaves. The house Negroes, they're kind of happy with their slavery. They're okay with it. The field Negroes, but they know they're slaves. The house Negroes know they're slaves, and they're not happy with it. The field Negroes, they know they're slaves too, and they're none too happy about it. But we're all slaves.
Yeah, so the few critics I have that post are typically house Negroes.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point.
They support it. They don't want the master to get hurt, because they could wind up ultimately getting hurt and losing their cushy position. And so lawyers and cops, judges fall within the what Malcolm X described as a house Negro.
Exactly.
It's so immoral. If it wasn't for the double standard, and no one can actually see, you get caught in a logical loop. When you ask him point blank, if I was to do things like the government, and like those called government, because there is no government, if I was to force strangers to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? And most people don't want to answer that are house Negroes that desperately want to cling to this idea that government exists and is a force for good. That they're moral and ethical actors. And so they will not want to answer the question directly. Well, there's like, well, you're a criminal, but not government. Well, what sets them apart? A written instrument from 200 years ago no one bothered to sign? Where's the proof that that applies? And you invariably get Somalia, you know, why don't you get the hell out of here? Oh, you're an idiot. I think the judges are right that to order a psych evaluation instead of giving any actual damn proof.
And that's the struggle. That's the struggle. That would be like the civil rights leaders of the 60s and probably countless civil rights leaders before them. You know, Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, Bronson Alcott, you know, the guys from the 1860s now I'm referring to. You know, they were making those exact same challenges to no avail.
We're making progress. There's more people that aren't paying taxes, more people that are not complying, but it's a slow going. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it has to do, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it's not what I was thinking. But it's that same line that, though, look, the ones who know the tyranny of those called government are those who stood up for themselves, like you.
Yeah, the people, if you really want to know whether or not you're free or not, try standing up and speaking out and trying to claim freedom. You really will learn the extent of the tyranny we're living under when you try to be left alone and to try to live free. That's when you will really learn the extent of the tyranny that we're living under. Trotsky Trotsky taught us that to defy the state is to die a slow death of starvation. It's a tough road to travel.
Yeah, and especially since it's still unfortunately considered so unorthodox, and so many critics either get it and ignore it or don't get it. That when we go in to challenge this. This was a challenge. This was a subversion of the whole concept of government that they rely on to justify their actions against you.
Yeah, they keep telling me to get back into my cage, and I say no. You know, I'm challenging the very foundation of everything. Lysander Spooner taught us this 150 years ago. I don't know if I've got my arithmetic correct, but, you know, the late 1850s. In his opus, No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority, which has woken up so many. I know it had an impact on your life, and it certainly had an impact on mine. Just challenge everything that you've been thinking. Just look at everything with a fresh set of eyes, with the eyes of creativity. Just ask questions. You know, you have taught us that if there's no evidence to prove it, why do we believe it's true? If there's no evidence to prove it's true, why do we believe it's true? Just, you know, put that on a sticky note, put it on your bathroom mirror, start memorizing some of this stuff and just thinking about it.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are true believers; they believe it, and a lot of, but then there's a good majority that act as if they believe it because they want to avoid the punishment, and that's the way it works. Under all that paperwork is the gun, and when you or I, when we go into these situations that we're forced into, the main purpose is, well, yeah, we want to be left alone, but we do that by stripping all that paperwork off the gun, and we're showing them for the violent thugs that they really are. Yeah, and it drives them. Why does it drive them crazy to be challenged? Because no one wants to be seen as a fraud and be immoral and dishonest. And here you're going to go in and you're going to ask these, prove it to me. This is one of the things I didn't get to ask. Did you? I think I know the answer to this, but. You're one now of many that have actually tried to plead guilty if the prosecution has met their prima facie burden, but they wouldn't even hear of it.
They wouldn't even hear of it. The unsigned plea of guilty. I go through at the right appropriate moment, invariably, I've got an unsigned plea of guilty ready to rock and roll, all made out with all relevant information, citations, case numbers, dated, every single aspect, names, addresses, courts, every single aspect of the unsigned plea of guilty is 100% accurate, ready to rock and roll. All it needs is my signature. I've got my checkbook sitting right there. I pick them both up. I run my mouth a little bit, challenge them for the facts and evidence they rely on to prove the Constitution and codes apply to me simply because I'm standing on a piece of dirt called NH. You have the prosecutor drop that evidence right here, point it to me in the case file where this information is. I sign my name to this unsigned plea of guilty. You tell me how much money you want. I write a check in the checkbook, and we're done in 60 seconds. They never have taken it up on me one single time. They never have taken me up on that offer one single time.
Because
it's a rigged game. They can't produce what they don't have.
Right. There is no evidence. They don't need evidence. Yeah, because they got a prison system. That's the point. You're making the point for us by saying they don't have to prove it. You are making the point for us that they are dishonest criminals. If you are making a claim against somebody that they have to do or not do something, and you have no evidence whatsoever, and you claim you don't need evidence, and you're willing to use violence, you're a crook. I don't give a damn about some piece of paper from 200 years ago you think magically relieves you of this responsibility. You're a crook. You're a damn crook. And if you're supporting it, you're supporting a crook. It's that simple. There's got to be, and maybe, it's like this rising generation just does things in memes. Just funny pictures.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's like, what is happening to critical thought? I'm not saying there's a grand conspiracy. It just seems to be that every decade or so, it just seems that there are less and less people engaged in critical thought.
Yes, I think that's been proven.
Yeah, it's sadly proven. And even if they're capable of critical thought, they're not going to, like with these pseudo-skeptics, they're not going to put the focus of their skepticism on their sacred cows, even though they would be the ones proclaiming they don't have any sacred cows. I'm an atheist. I don't have a sacred cow. Bull! If you think that there are governments, and you think that they're a legitimate organization, and you think that written instruments that no one signed applies to everyone, and you won't even look at any evidence to the contrary. No, you're not a skeptic. You're just a douchebag. You are part of the problem, and I did a short video about that because that seems to be. Look, what's his name? I use it all the time. Christopher Hitchens. I agreed with very little of what that man said, but damn it, he was dead on the money when he said that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, and I couldn't believe how he supported the Bush war and whatnot. I just, how could someone who said that? So he's not using that. I'm not saying I've been guilty of this too, but it was named for him,
Yeah.
And for people who proclaim to be skeptics and which is great, we should all be skeptical. I like to think that I am one. You need to examine your own beliefs and see if you're holding something as absolute true and that is a sacred cow and somehow immune from questioning. It's so immune from questioning that you should be locked up and maybe agree that when a judge puts someone in jail for that. You don't have people out there saying if you doubt the existence of certain chemical properties that they should be put in to have their head examined.
Right.
But when it comes to the existence of government, the existence of states and citizens, lock him up. He's crazy.
Right.
Oh, God. Right. Give me a break. So
every time I go into a courtroom or a hearing, I always am thinking of the word delusional. I'm sure everybody knows what the word delusional is. Holding beliefs contradicted by rational argument. And invariably, I always end up leaving the hearing room or the courtroom, at least feeling that everybody else was delusional and I'm the only one that wasn't. And yet, in those venues, in those settings, there's no doubt that they all look at me like I'm the one that's delusional.
Yeah, well, the schizophrenic doesn't know he's schizophrenic.
Right.
But I've had a lot of people in and out of government, a lot of like prosecutors, say that they have a lot of respect for what I do. They just don't agree with my ultimate conclusion. And I'm thinking, point to one flaw in my analysis.
Correct.
Okay, if my proposition follows, or my conclusion follows the facts and all my my propositions, or I can't think of the word. If my argument logically follows from the facts and in my position there, then what's the problem?
Right.
They see that I have the evidence, they see that I have the logic, and it's the logical conclusion of the evidence, and yet they would rather stick to something that they admittedly say, that there is no evidence.
Sure. So I have a couple of thoughts there if I can jump in.
Of course.
Number one, truth is not determined by how many people agree with you. Number two, if these people these prosecutors who do make these comments to you, they can disagree with you or me or anyone else, fine. But put away the freaking gun. Leave us alone. Okay, you believe what you want to believe, and we'll believe what we want to believe. And anyway, so that's a big problem there.
Yeah, it reminds me when I did that TV show all those years ago. I said, look, have whatever reality you want. Just don't pick up a machine gun and drag me into your reality.
Right.
What's frustrating is I've known you for a while, and I respect you, and it's very difficult to watch a friend, a paisane, go through such and not be able to stop it. We may be stopping another one, a more serious situation. I don't know how much time we have to discuss that, but for this situation, so that's why a number of people. Well, I can only recall one thinking I'm quick to anger. I'm not, but you have to understand that it's tough to have empathy and actually give a damn and care about people, and to just sit by and watch, or hear something is unfolding and not be able to stop it. That's where the frustration from the other show came from. Yeah, that's the way normal people, I think, respond in situations where you're utterly helpless.
Yeah. Hopefully, if you have a soul, if you have a sense of morality, you will, cry a few tears, say a little prayer, and start getting involved. Start running your mouth. Start standing up. Start speaking out. We couldn't help Irwin Schiff. We couldn't help Dixon Cannon. There's so many people that die in prison, that have their lives destroyed. And we are a little bit helpless to help these people. But what we can do is rise up and start fighting ourselves. The violence, the coercion is the problem. That's the issue. We do, I'm probably going too far afield right here now, so please feel free to put us back on track. But we are a deeply, deeply immoral society, and it's because of the violence. Where does morality begin? Morality begins with consent. Does morality have a part to play in your life? Yes or no? And where does morality begin? It begins with consent. What is the difference between sex and rape? And I hope I'm not being, too coarse and getting a little too crazy here, but we have to stand up for what's right. Taxation is theft. Taxation is the initiation of force. Coercion is not good. Violence does not create obligations, and on and on and on. And anyway, so it's a problem.
Yeah, well, there's one guy that goes and says he's combining certain looking at statistics and correlating them, and saying that the world is getting less and less violent. And I disagree with that, because I think what he's doing is he's excluding normalized violence, which is done primarily by a people call government. I mean, here in the United States, for example, you have the highest per capita prison population, and
Sure.
and that's just including the number of people physically in still. It's not talking about the families that have been just decimated because of it, and then the lives that were destroyed, even when they get out, because it's so difficult to now be able to find work. If you're a felon, you're a felon. They don't care if it was just, some weed that the employer may actually indulge in himself.
Creates a cycle of poverty too. It's just it's a bad situation. These ridiculous felonies. Every single damn thing is a felony, and once you become, quote unquote, a convicted felon, oh my God! I mean, it's going to be hard to break free from that cycle of poverty and that label. And there's so many things that are closed off to you now. So many jobs, so many different things that you won't be able to do, and from owning guns to doing this or that, et cetera. And what was the felony? Did you murder somebody? Did you rape a 12-year-old little girl or something? No. You maybe had two little bags of cannabis or something like that, something ridiculous.
Yeah. It's I can't remember. I'm doing bad at remembering quotes, but it was Martin Luther King that we start to die the day we don't stand up for our core principles. And I'm not saying that we have to go always grab a gun, and it may not be practical, but there's a lot we can do, and it's. I don't know. I guess that's why I feel so. It's useless. Think, oh well, if I get a jury, and I'm still on the fence with that, because I've watched it where people went down in flames. It was horrible what they did to James up in Alaska. But then again, Rebecca just got a full acquittal from a jury and so it just, when you see things like that happen to someone like James. Again, not accused of hurting anyone, and had the IRS expert testify that nothing she presented, which she presented the documents, by the way.
Right.
The one who heads the Hendrickson unit, who presented the IRS financial documents that they were using against him, did any of the documents you presented prove that I had a tax obligation? She said no. Did any of your documents, any of your testimony prove that I believed that there was an obligation? No. They still convicted him. That was the whole case. That was the whole case right there. And the IRS expert, admitted that they couldn't prove willfulness. They couldn't.
I know.
My point is saying is that there's such a lack of critical thought. There's such a giving up of our moral compass to so-called authority figures. Yes, I'd like to be able to reach more people, and I'm glad that my channel's growing and other channels are growing, and it's just, it's tough when a good person like yourself, your family is under attack like this, and this coming proceeding, hopefully, with the petition for writ of mandamus, and you've got a hearing set for that, hopefully they'll do the right thing, and they will issue the stay as requested for the trial.
Well, those are kind words. We always can hope, but I think the whole thing is a rigged game and a giant show, and they always find some ridiculous reason to deny the things that we try and request, and they typically use red herrings. They use logical fallacies. In other words, we will be submitting a petition for A, B, and C. We will be asking for them to specifically address the issues of A, B, and C, and specifically respond, give us, conclusions and points of law or whatever regarding A, B, and C, and they respond back with a denial order, and all they talk about is D, E, and F. They completely do not address what we raised. It is just, they just red herring us like crazy and raise a complete different situation. I'm not sure if it's exactly a straw man. It feels more like the red herring logical fallacy is what they do to us. They start talking about other things, and they divert our attention over here. They start talking about D, E, and F, and that this gives them the reason to do whatever these things. And I don't know. We'll see.
I guess red herring is it's just a distraction. Talk about something else. It may not necessarily be relevant, or it could be a straw man, depending on what they're actually raising. But and that comes down to something that we see all the time in court. I tell people all the time when we're going through preparing for court, almost every single thing that they're going to say is going to be to divert your attention. I've said that from the very beginning. My experience was always the same. They're always trying to divert your attention. You ask a direct question, they ask you a question back. Right. Just answer the question. I know some questions are not always yes or no, but you know what? I put a lot of time and there's a lot of experience into the questions. I understand the difference between the two. I can frame a question. I'm intelligent enough to frame a question in a way that does not require a damn narrative.
Yeah. Mark, the third question that I asked the hearing officer 2 days ago was, am I entitled to responsive answers? And that was the third question. And he was still in a very good mood and very polite and gracious with me. And he said, not only that I am entitled to responsive answers, but he absolutely will hold the prosecutor to making sure that, she gives me responsive answers. Okay. That was the last responsive answer I ever got.
Yeah, when you were saying that, my irony meter broke.
I mean, I never got a responsive answer for the next 4.5 hours.
And you see, that shows, Mark, why would you ask that? What's the point of that question? Well, we're gutting the perception of fairness and due process. And now we can show that he contradicted himself.
Right.
You said I was entitled to a fair hearing and that I was entitled to responsive answers, and you promised, you gave me your word, and then you immediately broke it. So there you can show the judge was disingenuous and he wasn't being fair. So he contradicted himself.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
repeatedly.
Well, and everyone, that's what the beauty of the Socratic method. You're bringing out these contradictions by just asking the questions. And I want to address something really quick here.
Of course.
It keeps coming up that I'm just being a wise guy. I only say I'm only asking questions, but I'm really arguing. Really? Oh, so that prosecutor, when he did a direct examination, he really wasn't doing a direct examination. He was doing his opening statement. It's different in law. No, asking a question is asking a question. It could be leading to an argument. It can support your argument, but it is not the argument. I mean, I am so... is this really the best people have, Bill? Is that the best that they can do to tear down the work we're doing?
Yeah, because they have a gun.
Well, not a lot of them do, but just people commenting on my forum.
Oh, I see. The critics. Oh, the critics. Yeah. The trolls and the critics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm very respectful of your time. I can't believe I just looked at how much time we have spent on this. I'm glad that you were able to spend the time and give us an update. I hope we can get some better news next time.
We can always hope, Mark.
That's wishful thinking, Mark. Oh,
we're up against it. We have to start calling things by their true name. And I'm on this kick. I study real history, economics, philosophy, and logic. That really is what consumes my life. Real history, economics, philosophy, and logic. And I've been on a slavery kick lately. And institutional slavery, the idea of institutional slavery. And, of course, I don't think there's really any disagreement at all that, blacks in this country lived under institutional slavery for an obscene amount of time, far longer than the 1860s to 1960s that I alluded to. But I was just trying to make a time frame, a time reference to the end of the War of Northern Aggression. And, Jim Crow, for example, in that period of time, and the civil rights leaders of the 1960s. We have to start recognizing that we are under institutional slavery, tyranny, and that we have to start calling it that. And we have to focus on the word institutional. institutional at every single freaking level. They're all protecting themselves. They're protecting the clerks are protecting the prosecutors. The judges are protecting the prosecutors. The Miss Wyant in my matter 2 days ago, she was violating ABA 3.1, NH Court Rules 3.8 regarding probable cause, Rule 602 regarding witnesses with personal knowledge. She's violating all this stuff. She's arguing without evidence, all these different things. She's violating ethics and clear, hard rules and engage in all kinds of misconduct and not fulfilling her duty to prove her case, her burden of proof. And she can get away with every bit of this. Why? Because the institutional tyranny we're living under, the institution of the tyranny of the hearing officer protecting her. He could have just looked at her and said, Miss Wyant, what you got? Never did it. Never did it. Instead, I'm doing full-blown battle with the hearing officer while Miss Wyant is eating donuts and drinking coffee over there, having a great time watching the show. Instead of her being held to her burden to prove her case, to prove her argument, she's the accuser, she's the moving party. I'm practically having a fist fight with the hearing officer. That's institutional tyranny. Every single aspect of this entire system that we're living under, we have to start calling these things by their right name. And we have to start really bringing that out to light and, dare I say it, calling for non-compliance with all this crap, calling for civil disobedience. Stop trying to believe that we're going to change this system from the inside by participating in process and procedure and just quietly exiting the system, not participating in the system, and I just think that's the way it's going to have to be.
So I shouldn't go work for Goldman Sachs. To tear it down from the inside. Hey, I agree with all that. I think, you're right. And I think the easiest way to point out just how grossly unfair it is just to ask them, would I get and would you support me arguing against the prosecutor without evidence?
Exactly. And I used a couple of examples, to bring that out. If you'll allow me, I used an example where I picked up a file folder and I said, listen, I have incontrovertible evidence in this file folder right here that I've been out of the country for a decade. And I just showed up back in the neighborhood today and had all this mess dropped on my desk. And I don't know what all this hubbub is about, but I haven't been around. And so you'll, of course, give me a free pass now. You won't expect me to prove my assertions or my allegations, will you? You're going to give me the same free pass that you're giving Miss Wyant, correct? You're not holding Miss Wyant to have to prove her assertions, or am I going to be able to be given that same exact free pass? And then I used another example as well, which is a little crass and a little crude, but it's got to do with making reference again to having incontrovertible evidence that I got pictures of Mr. Wentworth on a beach in Acapulco naked with a couple of 10-year-olds. And so at the exact same moment when he's allegedly investigating me and doing some things to me, about me, et cetera, et cetera. So, I've got incontrovertible evidence that he's wrong and I'm right. But, of course, you're not going to require me to actually prove any of that, right? Because you're going to give me a free pass on my burden of proving it, just like you give a free pass to Miss Wyant on proving anything that's coming out of her mouth. So, yeah, it's a mess.
I do have to point out that, something you had mentioned that wasn't done, has been done. And so one of the most recent examples that I can remember, so if those who are not familiar, I'll get it linked in to the show, in Wisconsin, and it's all in writing, judge ordered the prosecutor to respond to the motion and the discovery request, and the prosecutor didn't with anything other than it's frivolous. So the judge granted the motion to dismiss, stating very clearly, you did not offer the evidence or a legal justification for not having to provide the evidence. And he threw it out. So occasionally, some of these guys do sit back and do the right thing and hold the prosecutor to their burden, but it is not nearly enough. And here, unfortunately, with yours, they weren't even trying. So, unless somebody can show a valid, logical justification for the double standard, they're crooks. They're they're crooks because they force us to pay them, and then they maintain these double standards and do the things that like they did with you, which of course goes back to what we said originally, that the decision was already made that you were guilty, and then everything had to conform to that. He just screwed up by saying that yes, you are entitled to responsive answers.
Right.
You caught him off guard there. So, well, Bill, I'm sorry for all this happening. I'm hoping that we get something. You'll be able to tell me very soon that that the Superior Court did grant the stay of proceedings pending a determination of the petition for the writ. Because
we'll know in a couple days.
We'll know. All right. Well, yeah. Well, we are. Again, this is for May 27th edition of the No Stay Project here on LRN.FM. So, yeah, we'll give an update as soon as when we have it, and hopefully we've got some good news. So, but we'll do what we can to help clean up what's left. But you got my respect, and you've definitely made a stand. And for those people like Rudy Ogden, I think it was the one. Why did you do all this, Bill? Why didn't you just do X, Y, Z? Because you're a man of principle, and you don't like to be told what ordered around. You like people to treat you like an adult. That's
all there is to it. Stop telling me to get back into the cage. Stop telling me to, get back into my box or do whatever. I thought we're supposed to be free. When does the freedom thing kick in?
Yeah, I remember that call. I was stunned when the guy asked me why you're doing all this, and I said, because you are a bully. You never asked the man as an adult. You never treated him as an equal. You just barked orders at him, and you expect him to jump.
Yeah. Why did Martin Luther King ever do everything that he did, and James Baldwin, and Andrew Young, and Malcolm X? Why did they do everything that they did?
Men of principle are easy to admire, but it is it's a great line, of course, from
Braveheart.
But all right, well, I appreciate your time. I mean, after all this week, and then to spend this, wow. I'm glad you gave us an update. We had some really good material, and hopefully, if there's somebody who may be going through a similar situation, that they can learn something from it, and that it can help them.
And thank you for standing up and doing everything that you do, and showing us the way, and having the courage to challenge the institution of tyranny that we're living under, and to strike the root. Thank you for teaching us about Lysander Spooner. Those of us who didn't find out about him earlier, then you're bringing him up. Thanks for doing what Henry David Thoreau taught us to do. Stop hacking at the branches, start striking at the roots of the tyranny that we're living under. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad I'm able to help. And just to throw this last little bit of tidbit of information in there, it was not just local agencies and state agencies. We actually involved assemblymen or legislators, and the entire executive council refused to lift a finger. And I have 2 councilmen on record not being able to prove that their rules apply to anyone. So this is, we covered our bases here. This is not just an arbitrary thing. There's a lot of work that went into this. And Ray Burton was one of the...
Correct.
Yeah, and then his replacement, a former Marine, well, I can't say former Marine, but he also couldn't prove it, and didn't think he thought I was stupid just for even asking. So
Joseph Kenney.
That's right. So we'll make sure that I get that, we get that up so people can see what they look like. Yeah. Again, thanks, Paisan. I really do appreciate the time. My name's Mark Stevens. There's more to come on this pre-record for May 27, 2017. And as always, till next time, salud.